Week 9 in preparation for my standards check. Another good week this week in preparation for my standards check that is in a little over a week now. So only one more of these before we are then on the standards check. This week was another good week of learning and preparation. We had Nick down on Wednesday. If you follow the Facebook page, you'll see, gave him a little tag on there, and some really good stuff from Nick when he was observing my lesson with my pupil and areas that I can improve. So, some slight changes kind of since that lesson and going forward to yesterday and today and going into next week. And I've kind of done a full circle. I'm going back to focusing on the competencies and making sure that I'm showing all of them in all areas, which I think is kind of needed. There's benefit in all of the competencies and I can see it. And I think my focus has been on developing as an instructor, and there's always going to be areas that I can develop. But now my focus is very much standards check. I've narrowed it down to a few areas, but if we talk about some of the things that were picked up off Nick, it was very similar to what Tom picked up the week before, and that was identifying the faults of the learner, and mentioning them and maybe adapting the lesson where it's needed. And I was filming an episode with Sean last night, who's been on the show before, and we discussed this as well in some detail. And I think as an instructor, I've maybe become complacent with a few things. And we also know that we've got a long period of time with learners. So maybe something will happen, but it's like, I'll keep an eye on that, and just make sure that it doesn't become a common theme. Or we're not worrying about that today. We'll put that to one side and we'll deal with that in the next lesson or in the future. And we maybe just make a note of it and come back to it. But I don't believe we can afford to do that on a standards check, because from what an examiner might be seeing is if you're missing faults, then you're missing faults. They don't know what we normally do. They see a snapshot for 45 minutes of our teaching. So very much on the competencies now going forwards. And what I'll do, I'll go through one of my older logs that I'm going to be going back to moving forward, and some of the things that I'm focusing on initially. And that's practice areas. I've got my student. Don't know what we're going to be doing on the standards check yet, but the things that I need to bear in mind are choosing an appropriate area for the goals that the pupil has and the needs that they're showing. And then, was the lesson plan adapted when appropriate to help the pupil work towards their learning goals? Now, whether we adapt the lesson or whether we mention the faults and take note of it and work on it at a later date, the way I'm going to deal with that will depend on the lesson. It will depend on what's shown as a need and whether we need to go and adapt or not. Was the trainer aware of the surroundings and the pupil's actions? So I guess this is where I've been showing to be falling short, and that is, am I aware of the pupil? Are we dealing with it? Is it being mentioned? Are we fixing it? So that's something that I really need to be aware of. Was any verbal or physical intervention by the trainer timely and appropriate? So if I'm having to get involved verbally, for example, because our positioning's wrong or we're coasting around a corner, whatever it is, then I need to make sure that that's appropriate for the pupil as well. Was sufficient feedback given to help the pupil understand any potential safety critical incidents? Again, I think that's linked. So I need to make sure I'm on it with those competencies with the pupil. Were opportunities and examples used to clarify learning outcomes? Again, I think that can be linked to the areas that I need to work on. And was the pupil given appropriate and timely feedback during the session? So I think the areas that I'm working on and weaker on are linking back to those competencies, and what I'm seeing in the areas that I'm falling short. I think it's very much linked to the area. And I don't mean that as in the area that we're working on specifically, but driving to the area or driving from one area to another. And then things are happening and it's like, well, that wasn't the goal. So we'll not worry about that, and we'll carry on with the goal. But I can't afford to have that happening on the standards check. So I need to make sure that the area we're using is suitable. And what I need to be looking at as well is minimizing the risk of something happening. And I don't mean a safety critical incident, but just something happening that the student maybe doesn't do or could cause us a need to adapt. So very much thinking about the pupil, what they need to be working on, and targeting a specific area to then work on those skills. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I've identified where I'm falling short, why it's happening, and how I'm going to make that change going into next week and then into the standards check. So we've got a plan. I've got an idea of what I'm going to do. And those are the competencies that I'm going to be focusing on specifically tomorrow on my lessons on Saturday. Reflect, see how they've gone, see where the other competencies have gone, how that's looking, and very much reflecting on the competencies next week. But not just reflecting after the lesson, going into the lesson with either a specific competency or a selection of competencies that I'm looking to focus on. And what I'm finding is the links in the competencies. If I'm falling short somewhere, then it just has that knock-on effect. So I'm falling short on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 competencies there. So if I was to lose 1 mark in each one of those, then we've not got much of a buffer to be getting that A. So absolutely everything that I've been doing up until this point has been about me developing and improving my skills and providing a better lesson for the learners. And I still very much want to be doing that, and I'm sure I always will be, but I need to be specific. I've got a standards check coming up. So I need to make sure I'm in the best possible place to score high on the standards check. But that's where I'm at. We've got one more log. So next Friday, I'll be checking in, hopefully a similar time. And I should be about ready for the standards check there, or terrified. And well, we'll see what comes on Friday. But I have some plans. I have an idea of where I'm going. I'm feeling reasonably confident going into the standards check at the moment. That could change. But if you've got any feedback, any points, any questions, whatever, use the comments or reach out on the Facebook page and ask them there. I forgot to ask for any questions this week. Yesterday was a busy day, and then I was filming last night, so I just forgot to get the post out, in all honesty. But use the comments, use the Facebook page or the Facebook group, or drop me a message, and anything that I can share next week before the standards check, I will do. But yeah, that's it. I will catch you all either in the group on the Facebook page or next Friday at a similar time. So I hope you all have a great weekend. I will catch you next week.